Save the manuals, which is exactly why we made this best-selling tee, because, well, if you buy one, you're helping save them. Because Save the Manuals is the rally cry for the initiated, and something that we have to keep fighting for, because, gosh darn it, they're going extinct. And today, on Blinker Fluid, we're gonna dig into why. Let's go. Now, no matter how you slice it, manuals are getting rare, and more rare every single day. Even Ferrari killed off their manuals completely in 2016. Not that many people really noticed since we were all playing Pokemon Go. I'll never claim that Ferrari is always making good decisions, but seriously, Ferrari, come on. You can't get rid of the stick shift. I mean, they make cars that are meant to be driven, or at least they used to. Seems like car companies have completely forgot why us enthusiasts love a good manual. Well, let me remind them. See, when you drive, one of the best feelings in the world is the engagement.
Will you marry me?
Well, not that kind, but it's being connected to the road, and maybe more importantly, being connected to your car. And there's one thing that really gives you that connection. It's a manual transmission and puts the blame for failure or success squarely on your shoulders. The RPMs climb because you want them to, and you know for sure things are happening because you, yes you, are the one moving the shifter. You have to grip it. You have to move it mechanically, and you gotta keep the car in the power band to get the most out of it. That extra control means that racetracks are largely dominated by manual transmissions, and that engagement used to mean that sports cars were always a 3-pedal kind of thing. Of course, that's the enthusiast perspective. Unfortunately, we don't get to make very many automotive decisions, since in the scheme of things, we're sort of a rare breed. In the days of old though, lots of people, they wanted manuals. After all, they used to be cheaper. You've probably never seen it to be true, but even in the 90s, getting a manual transmission, which not only uses less complicated parts, but it's also cheaper to put into cars, you could save like $3,000 when buying a car. And not only were they cheaper to buy, a manual transmission cost a lot less to fix. Or at least they did when shops knew how to fix them. Fixing them now is like reading Braille now for most technicians, because you just don't see them that often. Plus, weight savings. Automatic transmissions, well, they're heavier and they're way more complicated. It's like why you broke up with your ex-girlfriend. Well, it's complicated, just like a transmission. Think about it. Torque converters and valve bodies and clutch packs. And it's a nightmare even just looking into one, unless you're Trav. He's actually a robot, so he's into this sort of thing. So let's talk about the final party piece. Up until fairly recently, manuals were more efficient. You didn't have all those extra parts to power or spin, and you didn't have any slippage unless you drove around with your foot halfway on the clutch, like my grandma used to. So if you lived in a country with high fuel costs, opting for a manual could save you big money in the long run. That's why you find manuals in 2 types of cars. Your high performance enthusiast focused cars like the Type R, and the cheapest of cars like the old base Toyota pickups and Geo Metros that were convertibles. God, I didn't even know that these things came in a convertible. It's kind of cool. But now things have changed a lot. For one thing, manuals aren't cheaper anymore. Some cars you even have to upgrade to a 6-speed manual. Looking at you, Mopar, you money-grubbing sons of a. For another thing, like we said in a recent video, cheap cars in general are freaking gone. And you know, these days, average people, they hate manuals. But if you love them, this is the shirt for you. So many compliments. I wear it every day. And when I'm not wearing it, well, then I just don't have a shirt on. So, when the first automatic transmission came out, they were complete garbage. Those old autos robbed a lot of power from the engine and often made stupid decisions. What I mean is they don't make decisions, but you know what I mean. Like, they didn't shift correctly, or when you wanted them to. I mean, if any of you have ever driven an automatic truck from the 80s and experienced that hunting of gears, you know, where you try to accelerate, but the transmission doesn't want to downshift and let you pick up the pace. Then it finally does, and then upshifts again right away. Or it just can't decide which gear it likes for going up this hill. Or the torque converter constantly locks and unlocks for no reason. You know what though? A lot of average people don't care about performance. They just want to hop in their car and get from point A to point B. So even though early automatics sucked, they were pretty popular. And I know there are people who believe the reason that Americans drive autos is that they need to eat and drive at the same time. And I know many a European to mock Americans of being too lazy to drive real cars. Honestly, I sympathize with that sometimes. But it's also true that America is huge and has a lot of highways. And you know what sucks to do on highways, especially if there's any sort of traffic? It's shift gears. It will suck the life out of you. And if you've ever been to Los Angeles and sat in their traffic for 3 hours in a 3-pedal sports car, well, I hate to say it, but you probably stared at those Priuses with envy that just crept along and they didn't have to try to drive. Or maybe not. As the 1960s came and went, autos slowly started getting better. The feedback loop began. Lots of parents bought automatic cars, which is what their children learned to drive in. And that led to a new reason for people not to buy manual. Every year, less and less people even knew how to drive them. So it's not necessarily that they didn't want to, it's just that they didn't know any better. So by the time the 2000s hit, less than 1/3 of all cars were ever available with a manual to start out with. And the final nail in the coffin was the explosion of the new automatic transmission tech in the mid-2000s. 8-speed, ultra smooth gearboxes, CVTs, and dual clutch semi-autos entered the arena. And those basically eliminated every advantage manual transmissions had. They were cheaper to mass produce, had better performance, and since everything is computers now, we're better in sync with the modern drivetrain. By 2020, less than 10% of all cars sold had 3 pedals. Even cars that should be at the top of the list for manual transmissions, like the 86, WRX, MX-5 Miata, barely sell more than half as 3-pedal options. That means that even people who want driver's cars often prefer to just drive and not shift. God, I'm getting hives just talking about this. And the icing on the cake are companies like Chevy with the new C8 Corvette, and aforementioned Ferrari, who doesn't even offer 3-pedal cars anymore. If you want a new Corvette, you have to get an auto. There are no other options. Since fewer than just 25% of Corvettes were ever bought with a manual, I don't think old GM is very worried. And I'm worried. I'm sad. The other side to the lazy people thing is that, no, really, if all you care about is performance, automatics take the cake hands down. A DSG Golf R shifts way faster than you or I can, and an 8-speed performance transmission is much better at choosing the more efficient gear than you or me. Well, I'm pretty bad at it. And a CVT is actually a pretty amazing piece of technology as long as it wasn't touched by Nissan. If your goal is to go fast, burn gas, and you don't care about the hard to define driver engagement, you just care about the numbers, you're gonna want a modern automatic. Then of course, let's talk about the elephant in this room. Jeez, I know I was in a zoo. Electric cars don't have transmissions. Okay, so most of them don't. The ones most people buy, you know, the Teslas, the ID4s, the Ioniqs, the et ceteras, they are all direct drive motors. The Porsche, well, you get 2 gears, which is pretty cool, but you ain't shifting it, an automatic is. And with all the others, you don't get to choose between manual and auto. You really just don't get either one. I don't think I need to tell you that the future involves a lot of electric cars. Between companies pushing them, rising gas prices, and a population that wants to be more eco-friendly, allegedly, that seems like it should spell the end of manuals entirely. Although, there is still hope. First off, there are still some amazing enthusiast cars selling for very high percentages with 3 pedals. 8 out of 10 BRZs, for instance, are manual. A Civic Si doesn't even come with an automatic option. Volkswagen will still sell you a GTI with a clutch pedal. Dodge will stick a manual in pretty much anything. And as much as I'd like to rag on them, and people are excited for the Integra, Z, and GR Supra just because you have a stick option. And Hyundai apparently is working on a manual transmission option for electric cars. No freaking way. That's pretty cool. We even did a video on how Mazda is still focusing on producing a Miata that's largely unchanged. So that's probably going to have a manual option as well. I mean, that's not great, but it is something. And what it's going to mean is that us enthusiasts need to keep the art alive. So keep those old manuals alive. Learn to land those money shifts. No. actually don't. And check out our video on how to drive a manual if you don't know, right over here. And it is an ideal vid where I teach YouTube girlfriend how to drive manual on a supercar. I'm Brad, this is Ideal. Let's together save the manuals and promise me one thing, keep living the ideal lifestyle.